They hit the door like they already own the place. These aren't city police, and they're not the local vice squad. They're federal agents in plain coats, moving with precision, moving fast, as if they've rehearsed every step of this hallway in their minds. Wood cracks, glass shatters, heavy boots pound against the floor. Then the building begins to bleed beer. It gushes from ruptured barrels and open taps, flooding beneath tables and sliding down the stairs. The smell is sweet and sour, the kind of scent that says a party soured into something darker. Elliot Ness stands right in the center of it all. He is young, clean-cut, and sharp-eyed. He's the kind of man who still believes the law is supposed to win, the kind Capone can't buy. They call his team the untouchables because they can't be bribed. And in a city where everything has a price, that makes them dangerous. Reporters pack the entrance. Cameras flash. The public sees a hero. If you grew up on the legend, you probably think this is where Capone falls, that Ness brings him down. But that is the first trap in the Capone story. Ness turns up the heat. He makes Chicago sweat. He rattles the machine. But he doesn't close the cell door. That happens somewhere else, in a quieter space, through paper, through numbers, through a move Capone never sees coming. It's never the loudest moment that changes everything. It's the subtle one, the lever that no one sees. And in this story, the lever isn't a gun. It's a line in a ledger. Here's the question that pulses beneath it all. How do you cage a man the city keeps protecting? Remember that. Capone's strongest weapon wasn't violence. It was permission. A city doesn't fall apart all at once. It rents out its control slowly, one small favor at a time. But let's rewind. Before the raids, before the headlines, before Capone became a name etched into pop culture. He was born in Brooklyn, January 17, 1899. Capone's world started in a crowded apartment with immigrant parents working non-stop and kids piled in tight. The adults labored. The streets raised them. He had the mind for school, but his instincts moved faster than his judgment. At 14, he hit a teacher and got expelled. And just like that, the last bit of structure in his life was gone. People like to call that fate, as if someone carved the word gangster into his future. It wasn't. It just meant the street started offering him options. And the street always has work. He ran errands, stole, collected. He worked for gangs. Then came the real education. Older men came into the picture. They didn't call themselves criminals. They called themselves businessmen, protectors, necessary men. One of them was Johnny Torrio, the man who became Capone's mentor. He didn't teach Capone how to fight. He taught him when not to. It was a blueprint for longevity and a truth most spend a lifetime missing. Violence is a spark. Systems are the slow burn, and the burn always outlasts the flash. Capone learned that lesson, but he learned the wrong ones too. He took a job at a bar, talked too much, and got cut for it. 3 scars, a nickname he hated and a face the world never let him forget. That scar tells you everything. Capone took it personally, and a man who takes it personally doesn't stay in the shadows. There was one mistake Capone made that he never corrected. It wasn't murder, it wasn't a massacre, it was ego. Then the scene shifts to Chicago. Prohibition begins. Lawmakers try to ban booze, but Chicago doesn't flinch. Prohibition didn't dry up desire. It bottled it tighter. What used to be routine became criminal, and the ones willing to get violent rose fast. Capone moves west and steps into a city that fits like a glove. It doesn't just tolerate power, it sells it by the gallon. In Chicago, criminals aren't hiding in the shadows. They're in meetings. They're shaking hands with aldermen, paying off the police, turning the city into a machine that runs on cash and fear. The records make this clear. Capone isn't rising in a vacuum. He's being accepted, one handshake at a time. Capone begins as muscle, but it doesn't take long before he's running things. Torrio lays the plan. Capone brings the spotlight, and that spotlight becomes a problem. Because attention is the one thing Capone can't buy forever. Still, the empire grows. Liquor flows through the city like blood through arteries. Hidden bars thrive behind unmarked doors. Bootleggers run at night, and warehouses are guarded like banks. Every time the money moves, the city's backbone softens. Capone picks up the real rules fast. A cop can be clean and still take the money. A judge can look away without getting his hands dirty. And a mayor doesn't have to shake your hand. He just has to know you hold the leverage. Capone gets harder to stop because he stops being a man. He becomes a network. And you don't take down a network with one blow. You break it piece by piece. The network needs a safer hub. Cicero becomes that place. A suburb turned stronghold. This is where rumor becomes reality, where power becomes visible. Picture Election Day. The streets in Cicero are filled. Men in fine coats loiter, pretending they're just passing time. Ballots are watched. Voters feel the pressure. The air hums with that sharp, electric edge that comes before a fight. Chicago police arrive. They're not welcomed. Words turn into shoves. Shoves turn into gunfire. When the smoke clears, Frank Capone is lying in the street, shot and dead. Frank isn't just a name. He's Al's brother. He's blood on the pavement that can't be washed away. That's not a footnote. It's a pivot. This isn't just the loss of a brother. It's the moment Capone stops believing in restraint. If the law can take what's his, he'll squeeze the law until it gasps. He tightens his grip, expands his reach, and starts sending messages. Businesses that push back get crushed. Cars go up in flames. A refusal turns into a problem, and problems are handled without remorse. Some call it chaos. It's not. It's enforcement. It's punishment, organized and deliberate. And it works. By the late 1920s, Capone was rich beyond calculation. He lives openly. He dresses in style. He gives interviews. He smiles for the cameras. Most bosses move in the shadows. Capone puts himself center stage. But a performance never plays to an empty room. That is important. Capone is building two things at once: a business that runs on quiet and a legend that lives on noise. One stays hidden. The other demands to be seen. And when those two pull against each other, people die. As Capone builds his legend, he builds enemies along the way. The North Side Gang isn't just standing in his way. They're built from the same parts, same streets, same hunger. Two predators feeding off the same prey. Their war spills into the streets, and Chicago becomes the battlefield. Bodies fall, cars explode, men are gunned down in broad daylight. Each time it escalates, you think it can't go further. And each time, it does. The key rival is George Bugs Moran. He refuses to bend. He's hot-tempered, stubborn, and hard to scare. That makes him the ideal target. Capone marks him for removal. Moran circles him right back. Then comes the day that flips the entire country. February 14th, 1929. It starts in a garage on North Clark Street, men dressed as police, staging an arrest that was never meant to hold anyone. Moran's men are lined up against a wall. Then comes the gunfire. Fast, brutal, final. 7 men die. Moran survives because he's late. He sees the police car from down the block, pauses, reads the moment, and walks away. If he had gone inside, he would have been the 8th body. That moment changes everything. Not because it proves Capone gave the order. People still debate that. What matters is what it does to the country. It ends the romance. The public stops treating Capone like a clever outlaw, starts seeing him as a national infection. And once the people turn, The government can't look away. Remember this: the government doesn't need to prove every crime. They just need one charge that sticks. That's the shift. Chicago's way of doing things stops working. National attention takes over. Now we're back to the raid. The beer flooding the floor, the axes swinging. Ness and his men making headlines. Ness doesn't strike like lightning. He moves like a cold front, slow, steady, impossible to ignore. He brings heat, exposure, public pressure for action. And something rare for Chicago, he shows up with a team that won't take the money. In Chicago, that's revolutionary. Ness raids breweries, hits supply lines, breaks distribution. He invites cameras because he understands what Capone understands too. Image is power. Capone now faces two problems. One is operational. His liquor empire is taking real hits. The other is psychological. Capone is used to shaping the story. Ness is building a story where Capone looks weak. Capone can't let that stand. He turns up the volume. More intimidation, more bribery, more visibility, and that feeds the trap. Here's how the pressure builds. One raid leads to one headline. The public responds. The cycle repeats. Capone's name grows. And with that growth comes bigger hunters. Meanwhile, another team works in silence. They don't carry axes. They carry notebooks. They follow the money. They build a case that doesn't require a terrified witness to point a finger. What they use is tax law. And that is the move that rewrites everything. They don't have to prove Capone ordered a murder. They don't need a survivor to take the stand. They just need to prove he made money and failed to pay taxes on it. That's it. It sounds boring, but it's not. It's a perfect trap with no escape route. Even dirty money leaves a trail. You can't claim immunity just because it came from the shadows. You can bury it. You can fake it. But once they spot it, the math takes over. Track the income. Prove the lie. The trap snaps shut. Now come the quiet executioners. Treasury agents like Frank J. Wilson, not famous, not flashy, just relentless. They sift through ledgers, notes, and quiet stacks of paper, and slowly the noose tightens. Because a ledger isn't a dramatic prop. It's a confession written in columns. It lists names, payments, profits, trails that don't care about your reputation. Capone doesn't see it coming. He still thinks he's playing the old game. He thinks he can negotiate, cut a deal. In 1931, Capone's indicted for tax evasion. Capone tries to cut a deal. He's still expecting mercy. But the courtroom is no longer Chicago. The judge, James Wilkerson, switches the jury. That's the moment Capone's expression changes. He realizes he can't reach the people who matter. No time to bribe, no time to threaten, no influence. Just a clean jury and a clear path to trial. That's the lever. And that is what real fear looks like on a powerful man. He built a life on control. Now he's powerless to stop it from falling apart. On October 17, 1931, Capone was convicted, sentenced to 11 years in federal prison. The law couldn't stop the killings, but it could follow the cash. That's how they got him. And for most, the story ends right there. But prison isn't the end of Capone. It's the end of his control. And those are two very different things. At first, he reaches for the old playbook. He tries to buy comfort, cut deals, and hold on to influence. Then comes the transfer to Alcatraz. No phones, no allies, no headlines. Just rock, steel, water, and time. Now comes the part the movies leave out. Capone starts to unravel. Syphilis, untreated for years, begins to eat at his mind. He loses memory, loses focus. Confusion spreads. The man who once ran Chicago begins to struggle just to function. No drama, no applause, just decay. The empire keeps moving. Men take over. The machine adapts. Capone is no longer needed. Only May, His wife remains. Not to save him, but to witness what remains. Not the suits, not the smiles. Just the empty stare, the broken words. The man who no longer remembers why he's in the room. He's released in 1939, but he's not returning as a king. He leaves prison a shell. Hospitals take him. Then Florida swallows what's left. May stays, not to remember who he was, but to watch him disappear. Capone dies in 1947 at 48. Capone's buried. But the system he thrived in? Still breathing. He's long gone. The myth isn't. Now he's a movie. A mask? A one-liner? A brand? The man vanished, but the legend went viral. People still say his name like it's a punchline or a brand. But that should make you stop and think, because the real lesson isn't that a gangster got punished, it's how long a society will protect a lie it enjoys. Capone didn't become powerful because he was the most violent man in Chicago. He became powerful because the system allowed him to be. He bribed what could be bribed. He threatened what could be threatened. He performed because the public wanted a show, and he lost not to bullets or raids, but to numbers. The moment the government stopped chasing the myth and started chasing the math, the story changed. Capone died, but the structure he revealed, that stayed. So let me ask you this. Was it the law, the ledgers, or the lens that brought Capone down? Drop your answer in the comments. Next time, we're heading to Monaco. One of the world's richest bankers dies in his own penthouse. The fire was meant to prove loyalty. Instead, it ended in death. If you think power protects you, this case will make you rethink everything.